My parents pitied me for working so hard in the countryside, so they arranged a blind date for me and pushed me to marry the village chief's only son. That way, I could avoid farm work. After I became pregnant, James Carter gave me all his savings with a cold expression. But before we had a chance to build any real connection, he disappeared. It wasn't until my daughter had an accident that I took her to Beijing for treatment, and at the hospital, I saw my missing husband, now accompanied by his lover for a prenatal checkup. When we recognized each other, Lily Evans was stroking her belly. She couldn't accept the betrayal and went into premature labor from the shock. She died from an amniotic fluid embolism. Only then did I find out that James had vanished to assume someone else's identity in order to attend university. My daughter and I followed him to Beijing, got registered as residents there, and became part of the life everyone in the village envied. Not long after, I became pregnant again. James Carter looked at me with tenderness, and I thought perhaps he had developed feelings for me. But on the way to the hospital for another prenatal check, he suddenly drove the car into a lake. My first instinct was to save both him and our daughter, but he clutched the car door tightly, his eyes full of resentment. "If it weren't for you and your daughter," he spat, "Lily Evans wouldn't have died. It's all your fault. You ruined my happiness, I'll make you pay." I felt the icy water closing in, flooding my lungs, and in that moment, I realized he truly hated us. When I opened my eyes again, James was arguing with the village chief, shouting that he'd rather be kicked out of the house than marry me. That's when I knew he'd also returned, but he still hadn't figured out that without his father, the village chief, he was nothing. I shook my head and took out my old high school textbooks. This time, I was going to take the college entrance exam and earn my way back to the city. What era is this that we're still arranging marriages? If I marry, I'll marry for love, not just settle for some stranger. At first, my parents had asked the village chief to help introduce me to someone, and when he heard it was me who wanted marriage, James agreed instantly, only because I resembled Lily Evans, the white moonlight of his youth, who went to college in Beijing. Now that he's been reborn and knows he has another chance with her, of course he's unwilling to marry me. The suffocating memory of drowning hasn't faded, and before I could recover from the flashback, I heard James shouting in that same, familiar tone, "You dare force this marriage today? I'll run away tomorrow. Our father-son relationship ends here." The village chief looked at him with cool detachment.
Fine.
"You're no longer my son. From now on, go farm the fields yourself." James instantly panicked. He knew his father's coldness well, and his tone softened. "Dad, I was just saying you didn't even ask Comrade Emily Harper's opinion. What if she doesn't want to marry?" "Of course I didn't. In my past life, I fell for him. Even after he disappeared, I gave up my chance to return to the city just to wait for him with my daughter. I didn't expect that my loyalty would become nothing but a burden to him. I won't make the same mistake again." Before I could speak, the village chief said sternly, "You're of marrying age and still refusing to settle down, disgraceful. If she doesn't want you, find someone who does, or don't call me your father." Then, without asking my opinion, he turned to me and commanded, "Comrade Emily Harper, how's your health? You should return to the fields." I wanted to match James with a scholarly girl. "You may be frail, but even after fainting in the cornfield, I still gave you full work points despite the gossip." The chief had bent the rules for me more than once. I didn't want to give up this marriage, but I was also afraid things would spiral. So I put on the air of compliance and said respectfully, "Comrade Emily Harper, I'll listen to my parents when it comes to marriage." I lowered my head and replied softly as usual, but in my heart, I was calculating there's just 1 year left until the college entrance exam. I need to study hard. When the exam system was reinstated a few years ago, no one knew what to expect. I had just graduated high school and thought I was prepared, but still ended up in the countryside. The village chief nodded in approval and rode off on his bicycle. I let out a long breath. As I was thinking about how to explain all this to my parents later, James stopped me. "Comrade Emily Harper, if you're still considering marriage, why not consider me? You already know my situation. Just think of helping me as helping yourself." James's Adam's apple bobbed as he looked at me, clutching a rough straw ring in his hand. In my past life, I would have said yes with joy. But now, I instinctively stepped back in fear. Back then, I agreed to a fake marriage with him, took some kind of drug, and consummated the marriage on our wedding night. I conceived our daughter from that one time. After learning I was pregnant, he gave me all his money and vanished. Later, I found out he had assumed a new identity for college, where he met Lily Evans again and they rekindled their old flame with such intensity it became uncontrollable. I ran into James again at the hospital while caring for our daughter. Lily was triggered into labor, and both mother and child died. James blamed me and our daughter so much that I hadn't even married him yet, but I already knew staying away from him might prevent another tragedy. So I steered the conversation with a calculated suggestion. Brother James Carter, the International Trade Building just launched a new necklace. I heard it's a limited edition. In my past life, Lily adored that design. She'd come back hundreds of miles just to get it, and she was even wearing it when she died. James seemed to understand my hint and rushed straight to the store. As I stood there, something inside me felt hollow. From the next shop over, I could hear the laughter of two people reunited after a long separation. Their sweet voices felt like knives twisting in my chest. Your brother James Carter's blind date? Lily Evans frowned as she looked me over. You just graduated high school, right? Planning to marry this early? Her tone was light, but the implication was sharp. As an educated youth, you really should respond to the call. Marrying a villager can help you settle down more easily in the countryside. I lowered my head and said nothing, staring at the seemingly perfect couple in front of me. But Lily Evans wasn't done. She clutched James's arm, raising her chin with pride. Look at this necklace. I told him it was too expensive, but Brother James insisted I take it. It's one of a kind, there's not another like it in the whole country. I said nothing. James had never given me jewelry, not even once. I guess he thought I didn't deserve it, with my plain clothes and calloused hands. Bitterness welled in my chest, and I turned to leave, searching for a reason to get away. But I hadn't gone far when I stumbled, distracted, straight into a man's strong arms. Comrade Emily Harper, I heard you're in a hurry to get married these days? A deep, steady voice brushed my ear. I instinctively pulled away and looked up, breath catching at the sight of his sharp features and commanding eyes. Standing tall beside me in a pressed military uniform was Michael Thompson, the same man who had kindly rushed his daughter to the hospital in my previous life. He was the only officer in Carter Village. Handsome, well-off, and orphaned, he had never married, though I never knew why. How did he find out I was looking for a partner? I snapped out of my thoughts, ready to explain, but before I could speak, he placed something in my hand. I looked down, a worn red handkerchief wrapped around a small passbook. The corners were frayed. It was all his savings, I realized. Likely his 4-year military allowance, plus the mission subsidies. Emily Harper, he said, voice trembling, I've saved 864 yuan and 30 cents. I also have a newly built home in the city. After marriage, we can have 2 rooms of our own. His Adam's apple bobbed as he blushed furiously, obviously nervous. When I didn't respond right away, he suddenly ran off as if remembering something urgent. But before disappearing, he looked back and said softly, Please wait for me. Dusk had fallen by the time I reached home. The moment I stepped through the door, my mother's sharp voice cut through the air. Why are you so late? It's outrageous to keep guests waiting for dinner. She scolded me with a feather duster in hand. Behind her, my father and James Carter were already seated at the table, chatting like nothing was wrong. I froze. Wasn't James with Lily Evans just moments ago? He casually wiped lipstick from his shirt collar, as if it meant nothing, and kept talking with my father like a dutiful son-in-law. My heart soured. He'd left me behind for Lily, and yet hadn't even bothered to explain anything to my parents. Looking at that red mark on his collar, I figured he and Lily must be getting married soon. I didn't want anything to do with him anymore. Mom, it was Comrade James who ran into something urgent and left halfway, I said, raising my voice. He didn't explain, and you're scolding me instead? What would people think? My father coughed, cutting me off, and quietly pulled my mother into the kitchen. We won't meddle in your generation's matters. You two talk it out. Your mother, and I will make a couple more dishes. I remembered how cold James had been in my previous life, too. He'd gone through the motions of marriage with me, expressionless. On our wedding night, he'd even whispered Lily Evans's name in his sleep. That's when I realized had never cared for me. If that was the case, why had he led me on in the first place? I forced down the ache in my chest and asked gently, "Where's Comrade Lily? I thought you two were supposed to be together?" James's expression turned at once. "Where did you go after we split up today?" he asked darkly. "Who was that man who brought you home?" I blinked in confusion. Was he jealous? I stammered. "It was just a kind stranger. He helped me on the road." But James sneered. "Don't think I don't know. Besides me, you're still going on blind dates with other men in the village. I spent a few minutes talking to Lily Evans, and you immediately ran off and clung to someone else. Emily Harper, do you think you can manipulate me with such lowly tricks?" I stared at him in disbelief. Why was he so angry? He'd rekindled his romance with Lily Evans. I hadn't interfered. And yet, he still minded whether someone else brought me home. I kept a calm face, but my heart was in turmoil. In his eyes, I was just a scheming woman, nothing like his radiant white moonlight, Lily Evans. "Since you're curious," he continued coldly, "yes, Lily and I reaffirmed our feelings today. She will be my wife. People should know their place no matter what tricks you use. You'll never get what doesn't belong to you." I turned away, brushing away the tears at the corners of my eyes. I understand. My parents arranged the blind date, and though I agreed, whether you believe it or not, I'll never like you again. James hesitated for a moment before pushing me aside with visible disdain, as if he didn't believe a word I said. In my last life, after he vanished, rich suitors came one after another, but I refused them all. I waited year after year with our daughter in Carter Village, ignoring even his father's advice to remarry. I don't know where the love came from, but it was deep and consuming. Now I'm scared. I don't want to repeat that life waiting for a man who would one day drown me with his own hands. So I whispered, "I'll leave first. Lily Evans is probably waiting downstairs," but before he could respond, there was a knock at the door. My parents rushed to answer it before I could. A cheerful voice rang out. "Hello, Uncle and Auntie.
I'm Lily Evans. I'm dating James Carter."
I heard you wanted to match him with Emily Harper, but he didn't know how to explain, so I came to make things clear." My father looked between James and me, his expression unreadable. "Why didn't you two tell me earlier? Where does that leave my dignity?" Then, sighing, he added, "Hurry and apologize to Comrade Lily." Despite several polite refusals, my father still insisted I see them out. The silence on the way down was deafening, like the world itself had muted. The three of us walked in silence, each lost in our own thoughts. As we reached the end of the intersection, I still hadn't figured out what to say when Lily Evans broke the quiet with a light, bell-like laugh. "Let's part ways here," she said sweetly. "And by the way, thank you, Comrade Emily Harper. Without you today, Brother James Carter, and I might have missed our moment." James said nothing, only stared at Lily as if bewitched, his gaze tender and longing as he pulled her gently into his arms. Lily gave his hand a playful pat and whispered, "Brother James Carter, Comrade Emily Harper, is still watching. After everything that happened today, she must feel awful." James glanced at me coldly, his voice full of disdain. "So what if she does? I love you. Isn't that all that matters? Why should we care about someone irrelevant?" With that, he held Lily closer. "Are you jealous?" he murmured. "Don't be. You're the only one I've ever truly wanted to marry." I stood frozen, trembling, unable to utter a word.
So he could love just not me.
Numbly, I watched their silhouettes fade into the distance. My mother, who had followed out of concern, came up beside me. Her frail shoulders hunched as she sighed. "Some things aren't worth forcing, my girl. Love takes two people. If only one is willing, it will never last." Her voice carried warmth and pain as she pressed an unwritten marriage certificate into my hand. "That soldier from Carter Village came to propose. This time, we wanted to ask for your opinion. If your heart says yes, then marry him." I nodded before I even realized it. Michael Thompson's earnest face appeared in my mind, and I was surprised to feel how easy it was to let go. I'd thought parting with James would tear me apart, but now that I decided, it wasn't so hard. As long as I stayed away from him, maybe I could avoid repeating the heartbreak of my past life. I returned to the village the next day, only to find the roof leaking from the rain. I borrowed pots and bowls from the neighbors to catch the water, but it wasn't enough. Looking at the battered old house, I went to ask the village chief if I could be reassigned. I had just finished laying out my bedding when two familiar figures barged in. Lily Evans clung to James's arm, tears brimming in her eyes. "Comrade Emily Harper, this is all my fault. I should have given up this room earlier. If you get sick from the rain, I'll feel so guilty." James's expression darkened slightly. As he consoled her, he turned to me and said, "Emily Harper, you need to move out." I stared at him, stunned. Did he really think I was trying to steal her room? His voice was cold and flat. "I was wrong to go on that blind date with you yesterday. If you're angry, take it out on me. Don't blame Lilith's too kind." My heart sank. "So, in your eyes, I'm targeting her on purpose?" My voice cracked with despair. "Is that really what you think of me?" James hesitated, then pointed at the bedding I had just laid out. "I'm giving you a chance to leave quietly. Don't make me throw your things out." I shook my head in disbelief, tears slipping down my cheeks. It was still raining outside. If he forced me out now, I'd have nowhere to go. I remembered how, in my previous life, it had also rained heavily on our wedding day. He had shielded me from the storm and promised to protect me for life. But now I knew Betterman's promises are nothing but lies.
Fine.
"I'll leave." James nodded. At that moment, the village chief's voice rang out from the doorway. "Educated youth quarters always have two to a room. There's no reason for one person to take it all." Lily gave a stiff smile and tried to explain. "I only meant to help Comrade Emily Harper. I didn't want her to get sick in the rain." I asked Brother James Carter to help, but I didn't explain clearly, so he misunderstood. James instinctively stepped in front of her protectively, but I caught the flicker of helplessness in his eyes. Of course he knew it was a poor excuse. He'd lived 2 lives now, saw through her act. He just didn't care. He still indulged her, just because he loved her. As they turned to leave, Lily leaned in close, her voice soft but deliberate. "Yesterday, I stole your blind date, and you made me wait an hour outside your door. We're even now. Just remember, Emily Harper, anything I want isn't something you can touch. You're not even qualified to fight me for it." She didn't bother lowering her voice. James was close enough to hear everything, but he didn't say a word. He simply shielded Lily behind him, eyes wary, as though I were some threat to his precious, white moonlight. "Dad, Lily Evans," James started, but the village chief cut him off with a wave. "This old man is confused. I just want to hold a grandson before I die." James lit up at the subtle permission and hurried to grab Lily's hand, dragging her off toward the Civil Affairs Bureau. She turned to flash me a smug, victorious smile. That evening, the village matchmaker knocked on my door with a betrothal gift in hand. "Comrade Emily Harper, this is from the officer next door. Have a look, see if it suits you." I stared in awe at the 3 turns and 1 ring, the classic wedding gift meticulously arranged and wrapped in red silk, even covering the worn spots with delicate bows. It wasn't extravagant, but it was the most thoughtful betrothal gift I had ever seen. Even though the rain had soaked through some of the wrapping, I couldn't bring myself to take it apart. I moved it inside carefully, heart warm for the first time in a long while. When my mother dressed me in a wedding gown and pasted big red characters all over the house, it hit May was really getting married. Not to James Carter, the man I waited for my whole past life, but to Michael Thompson, the man who had once saved both me and my daughter. Even though I had been married before, a quiet hope bloomed in my chest. I smiled at my reflection. Whatever the future held, it would never be worse than the life I had left behind. I lowered my head and walked to the door. The sound of firecrackers crackled closer. The groom had arrived. But when I looked up, it wasn't Michael Thompson standing there, it was James Carter, beaming with pride. He was surrounded by childhood friends, laughing and teasing him for finally winning the village beauty. A flicker of confusion crossed my mind. I knew I wasn't the one he truly wanted to marry. I had already made things clear to both our families. Why did he show up like this today? Before I could ask, a sudden gust of wind lifted my veil. James Carter's smile vanished. His face twisted into something unreadable. "Emily Harper, did you dress like this on purpose? Trying to crash the wedding? You're overthinking things." I instinctively stepped back, unwilling to be entangled with him again, but James lunged forward and grabbed my wrist tightly. It's better if you are overthinking. Lily Evans and I are getting married today. Don't try anything. His voice was low and sharp, full of warning. Hearing that only made my heart more resolute. I yanked my arm free and replied calmly, James Carter, my fiancé will be here any minute. Get away from the door. He looked at me with a sneer, still thinking I was acting. So dramatic. Still pretending, are you? But the next moment, Michael Thompson appeared beside me and, without hesitation, scooped me into his arms. Lily, he said softly, I'm here to marry you. His voice was warm and gentle, full of affection. James's expression froze. He clenched the torn red silk in his fist, seething with a fury even he didn't understand. Wasn't he reborn for Lily Evans? Didn't he vow to sever all ties with Emily Harper? So, why did it feel like something had been ripped out of him when he saw me about to marry someone else? He stood there, stunned, completely missing the way Lily Evans watching from a corner had gone pale, her eyes wide with panic. Michael carried me with steady steps, shielding me from the curious gazes of others. Before we entered the house, he gently brushed the hair from my forehead and warned me sweetly to mind the step. Clutching the edge of his uniform, I suddenly couldn't hold it in anymore. I whispered everything me past life, the pain, the betrayal. He listened and then gave me a quiet, earnest smile. I don't care about your past, he said. You're my wife now. From now on, we'll live a good life, peaceful, steady, and ours. I don't need a love story, I just need us to be safe and happy. I almost let myself believe in that quiet promise. Until, suddenly, a loud banging shook the door. James Carter burst in, his face twisted with rage. He flung a letter at me. Emily Harper. Just one misunderstanding between us, and you hold a grudge like this? Lily Evans, and after everything we've been through, you still had to drive her away, force her to break off the engagement and leave school? His voice cracked with fury. You're so vicious, so calculated. You broke us up. And now I'm the pathetic clown left behind. Are you satisfied? I blinked in shock, my mind blank from the barrage of accusations. Whatever Lily Evans decided, I said slowly, it has nothing to do with me. James's eyes darted around the decorated wedding room, and his fury only deepened. Still trying to act innocent? Emily Harper, don't think you're untouchable just because you've got a man now. I won't let you bully Lily Evans. My head pounded from the noise. I unfolded the letter in my hand, letting the words sink in. It was written by Lily. She'd returned to school after the summer break, and the letter painted herself as a victim full of grievance, helplessness in every line. No wonder James was so worked up. He needed someone to blame. But I had no patience left. I looked at him coldly. And what exactly does this letter prove? She's got 2 legs. Could I really force her to run away? Something snapped in James's gaze. Who else could it be but you? Listen carefully, Lily, and I are over. But don't think you'll benefit from that. You'll pay for what you've done. He lunged for a bench, lifting it high above me. I froze. There wasn't time to react. I ducked instinctively and braced myself. But the blow never came. Achio, don't be afraid, I am here. Michael's strong arms wrapped around me. I collapsed into his chest, and the tears I had held in for so long finally spilled over. This was what it felt like to be protected. Enough, Michael said firmly. My wife told you it has nothing to do with her. Didn't you hear? Holding me behind him, he brandished the bench James had dropped. We're from the same village, I am giving you face. But touch her again, and I won't be so polite. James faltered. Seeing how easily Michael had caught the bench, the fire in his chest dimmed. She says she didn't do it, and that's that? Where's the proof? He spat. My fiancé ran off. Someone has to be held accountable. Michael narrowed his eyes and gave a mocking laugh. And since when do we convict people without evidence? You think you're above everyone just because your father's the village chief? Fine. I say you're a trafficker trying to trap a college student into marriage. Why don't you prove you're not? The villagers who had gathered to watch now turned their gazes to James with suspicion. Panic flickered across his face. Clearly, He was afraid this mess would drag his father down. "Don't talk nonsense," he snapped. "Lily and I were in love. The whole village can vouch for that. We just disagreed on a few things. If I really wanted to trap her, she'd never have escaped the engagement." He paused, realizing how incriminating that sounded. Guilt crept into his expression. Maybe now, after everything, finally understood what it felt like to be falsely accused, to have no way to defend yourself. I had lived that more than once in my past life. And now, finally, the tables had turned. But I didn't care to keep fighting. "Think whatever you want," I said quietly. I handed the letter back and met his eyes. "Now, can you move? We still have a wedding to finish." The big red wedding characters pasted on the walls seemed to mock him, a reminder of just how unnecessary he now was. That one sentence, "we still have to get married," stabbed deeper than I expected. In James Carter's memory, Emily Harper had always been quiet, obedient, devoted. Even after he disappeared, she refused to remarry, raising his daughter alone and honoring his parents like her own. Back then, he felt proud. She was his wife, waiting faithfully in the countryside while he chased success. The marriage had only been a response to his parents' pressure, but as the years passed and he gained more life experience, he started to understand the depth of what she'd given him. He began to cherish it. Even his distant father had asked if he wanted to bring Emily and the child to the city. If not for that chance encounter in the hospital, if the mother and daughter hadn't insisted on recognizing him, might have eventually brought them both into his life for real. But fate had taken a different path. However, after Lily Evans's death, James Carter's heart turned completely against me. In this second life, he was determined to rekindle things with Lily and fix the regrets of his past, but he never expected that I would no longer be the same Emily Harper. I didn't insist on marrying him, nor did I cling to the broken promises he made. Instead, when he barged into my wedding, I calmly told him to step aside. Watching me lean into another man's arms in a white wedding dress stirred something ugly in him. Jealousy gripped his chest, but he didn't even have the right to speak. He lowered his head, unable to look at the scene so blinding, so heartbreaking that he himself had created. Deep down, he still couldn't believe that the Emily Harper who had once waited years for him would ever let go. For the first time, he questioned his choices since being reborn. But the moment his eyes fell on Lily Evans's letter, overflowing with affection, he felt a strange sort of comfort. Losing me? That was his decision. He still had his white moonlight. He still had Lily. Without waiting for my wedding to finish, James begged the village chief for travel money and decided to head to Beijing in search of her. Despite the chief's disapproval, he packed his things and boarded the train alone. On the day I discovered I was pregnant again, something unexpected arrived. A university admission letter. Was this the butterfly effect of my rebirth? In my previous life, I had taken the exam for years and never passed. Why was this life different? What's more, I had returned after the college entrance exam had already happened. I remembered how regretful I felt at the time, thinking that if I had just come back earlier, I wouldn't have been forced to choose marriage over my future. I stood there confused, staring at the letter in my hand, until the sound of the village chief's footsteps brought me back to reality. His hair had turned completely white, and he looked like he had aged 10 years in a single night. His voice was weary, lined with regret. "It's a good thing to be admitted, but now that you're married, maybe you should just stay home. Take care of your husband, raise your children. Don't make things hard for your man." I lowered my head and let out a soft, bitter laugh. So that was it. I hadn't failed in my past life. He'd intercepted my notice, abused his position to bury my future, just so his son could assume someone else's identity and go to university. James Carter had lived my dream while I was forced into marriage. But not this time. Someone, maybe even a villager, had reported the scene he caused at my wedding, and to protect himself from further investigation, the village chief was dismissed from his post. He had lost everything, and he knew it. Before I could respond, a warm, familiar voice cut in. "What's the dilemma?" Michael Thompson walked in with that steady, calming presence. "Why wouldn't you go to the university you worked so hard to get into? I'm proud of you. You're my wife, and I'm lucky to have you." The old village chief, no, the former village chief, was speechless. He had always believed women existed to serve men, that they were meant to stay in the shadows like I had in my last life. But now, seeing Michael's joy and sincerity, he said nothing more and left with forced dignity. Yet before walking out the door, he still had the audacity to say, "If you're going to Beijing, help look after my son." I stared at him in disbelief. Moments ago, he belittled me. And now he expected me to help James Carter? Where did he get the face to ask? Noticing my frustration, Michael gently pulled something from his arms and held it out to me. "Here, eat something to calm down," he said softly. "I just bought it from the supply and marketing cooperative. I heard pregnant women love this kind of snack."
Try it.
"If you like it, I'll get more tomorrow." I placed a hand over my belly, and memories of being pregnant in my past life came rushing back. Even though I had avoided farm work then, I still lived like a servant cooking under the scorching sun in the summer, washing clothes in freezing water during the winter. Even eating a single egg required someone else's approval. But now, someone was holding me in the palm of their hand, treating me with gentle care. It was something I'd never known. Still, doubt tugged at me. What if we were separated someday? Would he stop loving me too? Before I could voice my fear, Michael's next words scattered the anxiety in my chest. "A few days ago, my superior asked me to report to the capital. I thought of turning it down since we just got married, but now that you've been admitted to a university in Beijing, it's perfect. By the time you start classes, I'll already be settled in. Everything's working out." After we moved to the capital, Michael brought something home every evening after work, sometimes new clothes, sometimes little trinkets or snacks, sometimes a bouquet of flowers or a toy he thought the baby might like. The due date crept closer, and the teachers at school, worried for my health, approved a long leave of absence. I thought life would go on like this, quiet, content, stable. But one afternoon at the hospital, I saw them again, James Carter and Lily Evans. Only this time, he wasn't accompanying her for a prenatal checkup. He was there for her abortion. "Brother James Carter," Lily's voice trembled weakly. "Do you still have money? Am I putting too much pressure on you? The procedure today really hurt. You have to be good to me, okay? I'm a girl. I've done all this for you. Don't be stingy now." James looked exhausted, drained, hollow. Gone was the light in his eyes, the energy he once carried. It struck him then that being with Lily Evans in this life wasn't what he'd imagined. He had spent so long chasing the regret of losing her, haunted by the illusion of an idealized love. But in doing so, he had erased the woman who had truly stood beside him for years. He whispered to himself, "Emily never asked me for money, never complained." Then, like a switch flipped inside him, his eyes lit with urgency. "No, I need to find her." And just like that, he pushed Lily, still recovering, pale from the operation, aside and ran toward me. He didn't even look back. Lily Evans clutched her stomach and cried out in pain, her voice sharp with desperation. "James Carter, you said you'd be responsible for me. Oh, can't just abandon me now." But James didn't even glance back. The hospital was likely close to the university, and soon students from other departments began to gather, their eyes following the familiar voice. Whispers filled the corridor. "Isn't that the girl from the college next door? The one who brings a different guy back to her dorm every week?" "It's definitely her. Lily Evans, right? Always causing a scene. Now look, ended up in the hospital. She's not even trying to stay quiet. Still clutching her belly, acting like she wants the whole world to know that the guy who paid for her ran off. Serves her right." The judgment stung more than the pain. Unable to endure the stares, Lily stumbled toward the restroom, but her body gave out halfway. She collapsed to the floor in a pool of blood, her voice barely audible as she begged, "James, help me." But James Carter never once looked back. His eyes were already searching for me. "Emily Harper," he whispered, "I miss you so much." There was relief in his voice when he saw me, but the moment his gaze dropped to my rounded belly, panic replaced it. He rushed forward, gripping my wrist tightly. "How could you marry someone else? How could you carry another man's child? Did you forget our daughter?" His voice trembled with emotion. "In our past life, we were just a blind date, but you insisted on marrying me. You said you fell in love at first sight. You gave birth to our daughter, waited for me at home even when I disappeared without a word.
But now?
You marry a stranger?" His words were sharp, but there was pleading beneath the surface. He thought he could still win me back. He thought regret would be enough. But I had already heard too much. I shook off his hand and slapped him across the face. You can be with someone else, but I can't? You want to fix the regrets of your last life, fine. I helped you. But don't you dare blame me just because your perfect little romance fell apart in this one. I admit Lily Evans's death was partly my fault in the past, but in this life, I've done nothing. You're the one who ruined everything. My voice cracked, rising with fury. James Carter, have you forgotten how I died? Don't even dream of asking for my forgiveness. You didn't just betray me, didn't even spare our daughter. A man like you doesn't deserve to be a father. He stood there stunned, his face pale, then dropped to his knees with a thud. Tears streamed down his cheeks, but I no longer felt anything for them. I hope you and Lily Evans find happiness, I said calmly, then turned and walked away. As my silhouette disappeared from view, it finally hit him what he had truly lost. But by then it was too late. The girl who once loved him deeply, who waited year after year, no longer existed. Half a month later, I saw James Carter for the last time. He had lost his mind. His body was covered in bruises, one leg was crippled, and a group of nurses had chased him down and strapped him to a stretcher. I heard he kept muttering nonsense about being reborn and had tried countless ways to end his life. In the beginning, the local authorities sent people to treat him. But after a while, they gave up, just dumped him at the hospital and let him rot there alone. Achio, how are you feeling now? Sorry I'm late. Michael Thompson leaned over the bed, his arms gentle and careful as he picked up our newborn daughter. I turned away from the window and smiled, watching the soft light in his eyes as he looked down at our child. It's so good to have met you, he said, his voice low, filled with quiet warmth. Sunlight streamed through the window, falling on our little family.
It was soft.
It was peaceful. It was everything I had ever dreamed of. The noise outside seemed far away, like it belonged to another world. A window, a boundary. Perhaps from the moment we were both reborn, James Carter and I were never meant to be.